In 1953, Samuel Noah Kramer translated a Sumerian city lament from the Nippur collection at the University of Pennsylvania. Standard structure: a goddess weeps, a city falls, a temple is defiled, the population scatters. Kramer filed it as liturgical poetry. In 2019, graduate researcher Fatima al-Rashid at the Oriental Institute retranslated the same tablet with updated sign values. She found that Kramer's rendering had softened 14 critical lines. The unmodified Sumerian did not describe a city destroyed by war or divine punishment. It described a city where every living sound stopped at once, and the scribe could not say why. The Sumerian city laments are a genre that Assyriology has understood for over a century. They are liturgical poems composed to mourn the destruction of major urban centers in southern Mesopotamia during the late 3rd and early 2nd millennium BCE. The Lament for the Lament for Sumer and the Lament for Nippur, the Lament for Eridu. At least 6 major compositions survive, along with dozens of fragments. Their structure is consistent. A patron goddess weeps over her destroyed city. Temples are defiled, walls are breached, populations are killed or scattered. A divine council decrees the destruction, and an enemy army carries it out. The poems end with a plea for restoration, a prayer that the gods will return and the city will be rebuilt. The genre is considered literary, theological, a ritualized expression of communal grief performed in temples during Reconstruction periods. No serious Assyriologist reads them as event documentation. They are poetry, they use convention. The weeping goddess is a motif. The silent streets are a motif. The extinguished temple fires are a motif. This is the framework that has held since Kramer's foundational translations in the 1940s and 1950s, and it has never been substantively challenged. The tablet that Fatima al-Rashid retranslated in 2019 fits this genre in form. It follows the standard Kirugu structure, the stanza divisions used in all known city laments. It contains the expected opening, a goddess mourning, a city named, a catastrophe described. But when al-Rashid applied updated sign values from the Pennsylvania Sumerian Dictionary Project to the 14 lines Kramer had rendered loosely, the content diverged from every known lament in the corpus. Standard laments name the agent of destruction. The Lament for names the Elamites and the Sioux people. The Lament for Sumer and names the storm sent by Enlil. The Lament for Nippur names the foreign enemy whose identity scholars still debate. Every lament provides a cause, an army, a divine decree, a storm used as metaphor for invasion. This tablet does not. The 14 retranslated lines describe what happened to the city in terms that al-Rashid initially believed were damaged or corrupted. They were not. The text describes the cessation of sound. Not the sounds of battle ending, not the silence that follows a siege. The active, specific, categorical disappearance of every sound that constituted urban life. The lament catalogues what stopped. Temple hymns to Enlil, performed in continuous rotation by the Gala priests, ceased mid-cycle. The Sumerian term is shir kuga ba undib, meaning the sacred song was seized, not concluded, seized, as if taken from the mouths of the singers by an external force. The drumming in the Gipar, the high priestess's residence, stopped. The lowing of cattle in the temple herds went silent. Children's voices in the residential quarters disappeared. Market sound, river-barge calls, the grinding of grain, each one catalogued individually, and each one described with the same verb, dib, to seize, to take, to remove. The distinction matters because standard laments describe sounds ending as a consequence of destruction. Walls fall, people flee, the city empties, and then it is silent, cause, then effect. This tablet reverses the sequence. The silence comes first. The city is still standing. The walls are intact. The buildings are not burned. The text explicitly states that no structure was damaged. The silence is not aftermath. The silence is the event. Al-Rashid noted this in her preliminary analysis and used a term that does not appear in any published Assyriology paper. She described the city as quarantined. Not destroyed, not abandoned, not conquered. Separated from the conditions that made it alive. The Sumerian construction she identified supports this reading. The verb used for what happened to the city is bar, to separate, to cut off, combined with the determinative for connection or bond. The city was cut off. The text does not say from what. It says only that the severance was complete and nothing reversed it. What the text does describe, in the lines immediately following the silence catalog, is a change in the quality of light. The Sumerian phrase is dala-kur, brightness combined with wrongness or alteration. The same construction that appears in administrative texts when something has been modified from its original state. The light over the city did not dim, it did not disappear. It changed in a way the scribe designated as wrong. Not darkness, not eclipse, not storm cover. The light itself became something other than what light was supposed to be. And beneath that wrong light, the streets of the city remained intact. The walls stood, the temples held their shape. Everything was whole, everything was silent. In the Lament's next section, the one al-Rashid had not yet fully translated when she presented her preliminary findings, described what happened to the people who did not leave. The Lament describes them with a shift in register that al-Rashid noted immediately. The administrative precision of the silence catalog, each sound listed, each verb specified, gives way to language closer to the personal laments found in Sumerian burial texts. The scribe, who had been documenting the disappearance of sound with clinical exactness, could not maintain that tone when describing the people. They did not flee. The text is explicit. The people who remained in the city when the silence fell were found in their positions, seated, standing, mid-stride. The Sumerian phrase is lu ush an-niabgar, meaning the people were placed in death, not killed, placed, as if death had been set upon them the way a garment is laid across a body. The Lament says their flesh was whole, no wounds, no signs of violence, no marks of disease. The word used for their condition is ziba and zig, meaning the breath of life was lifted from them, lifted, removed upward. The breath did not leave the body through exhalation or through injury, it was taken. Al-Rashid cross-referenced this phrase against every known Sumerian medical text and death description in the corpus. The standard terms for death by disease, by weapon, by drowning, by fire, none match. The construction used in this lament appears in only one other known context. The Lagash administrative tablet, the one discovered in the Iraq Museum basement in 2021, uses a parallel construction, Ushbar Razai, killed from the outside by extracting the life force. Different cities, different genres, different scribes, the same clinical observation recorded in different vocabularies. The animals died simultaneously. The lament uses a term al-Rashid, translated as they fell as one body, a collective death construction that appears nowhere in Sumerian veterinary or agricultural records. Livestock do not die simultaneously from disease. They do not die simultaneously from starvation. The only context in which large populations of animals die at the same moment is exposure to an acute environmental toxin affecting all organisms within a defined area at the same time. The water changed. The lament describes the rivers and canals within the city taking on a color the text calls urudu jin, meaning like copper, reddish, metallic. The same description that the Lagash tablet applies to the Tigris after the surface became toxic, and covering every surface walls, streets, temple platforms, the bodies of the dead, the lament describes a fine residue. The word is sahardala, dust that shines. Luminous particulate matter settling on a city where nothing moved and nothing breathed. The environmental catalog, assembled across 37 legible lines, describes a city that was not attacked, not burned, not flooded, not struck by any force that left structural damage. It describes a city where life was extracted from every living thing within its boundaries while every physical structure remained intact, and where the environment itself became altered in ways that made the space lethal to anyone who entered afterward. Al-Rashid did not propose the interpretation publicly. She did not need to. The details propose themselves. The progression is specific. Silence, altered light, simultaneous death of all exposed organisms, intact bodies without visible trauma, luminous residue on every surface, copper-colored water. An environment that remained dangerous for an extended period after the initial event. This sequence does not correspond to any known natural disaster, not volcanic eruption, which produces ash and respiratory death. Not earthquake, which produces structural collapse. Not epidemic, which produces gradual mortality over weeks. Not instantaneous death across an entire population, including animals. What the sequence corresponds to, with the same uncomfortable precision documented in the Lagash tablet, is the aftermath of acute ionizing radiation exposure combined with radioactive fallout contamination. The simultaneous death of exposed organisms, the intact bodies, the luminous particulate residue, the metallic discoloration of water sources, the altered quality of light that is neither darkness nor normal daylight. The Lagash tablet describes the event from the perspective of those who evacuated underground. It is a logistics report. Census numbers, grain quantities, sealed doors, ventilation shafts, scouts who went to the surface and died within days of skin burns and vomiting. This lament describes the same class of event from the opposite perspective. It describes the city that was left behind, the city that did not evacuate, the city that received no warning, or received it too late, or could not execute the infrastructure response that Lagash had prepared. Two texts, two genres, two cities, one written by an administrator counting supplies and sealing doors. The other written by a poet mourning a population that died standing in streets where the light had become wrong, and the dust glowed, and the rivers ran the color of copper. The administrator recorded what the survivors did. The poet recorded what the dead looked like. And the lament contains one additional detail that the Lagash tablet does not. It describes the gods leaving, not as punishment. The standard lament formula attributes destruction to divine anger. Enlil decreed the storm. Anu turned his face away. This tablet uses a different construction entirely. The gods did not turn away in anger. They departed. The Sumerian is Dingirba undazig, meaning the divine ones rose from it. Rose, withdrew upward. And the theological term for what remained in the temples after their departure is mi ba-an-kur, meaning the divine radiance was altered. The melamu, the supernatural luminosity that Sumerian theology attributes to the presence of gods in their earthly houses, dimmed. Not extinguished, dimmed. As if the divine power that sustained the city's connection to the cosmic order had been reduced, weakened, contaminated by whatever had descended and made the city silent, the gods did not destroy this city. The gods fled from it. And what they fled from left the temples standing, the walls intact, the streets whole, and every living thing within them dead without a mark. 3 generations passed before the site was reoccupied. The lament records this period with a single line. The city sat in silence for the span of grandfathers. The scholarly consensus on Sumerian city laments has held for 80 years. They are literary compositions. They use poetic conventions inherited from an established tradition. The weeping goddess, the silent streets, the abandoned temples, the extinguished fires, these are motifs. Formal elements repeated across texts because the genre required them, not because they documented specific physical events. This is the position of every major Assyriology department in the world. It has never been formally challenged in a peer-reviewed journal. The challenge would require an Assyriologist to propose that the city laments are not purely literary, that the motifs encode observational data, that the details shared across multiple laments, the altered light, the simultaneous cessation of all biological sound, the luminous dust, the copper-colored water, the intact bodies emptied of life are not poetic conventions, but descriptions of a real and recurring phenomenon that the Sumerian scribal tradition preserved in the only genre available for processing civilizational trauma. No one has proposed this because proposing it requires answering the next question. If the laments describe a real event, what was the event? And the physical details, cross-referenced against the Lagash administrative tablet, correspond to only one known phenomenon. A phenomenon that human civilization did not produce until the 16th of July 1945 at the Trinity test site in New Mexico. No Assyriologist will attach their name to that sentence. The career math is simple. The institutional cost of being wrong about Sumerian poetry is 0. The institutional cost of being right about Sumerian radiation is total. So the laments sit in their collections. The tablet al-Rashid retranslated sits in the University of Pennsylvania Museum, catalog number assigned, classification unchanged. It is filed under liturgical poetry. Its 14 critical lines have not been published with the updated sign values. Al-Rashid's preliminary analysis was presented at a graduate seminar in 2019. 7 people attended. No recording was made. Her doctoral advisor suggested she pursue a different dissertation topic. She did. The Lagash tablet sits in the Iraq Museum in Baghdad under restricted access. The Lament tablet sits in Philadelphia under standard access. Neither has been cross-referenced against the other in any published study. The administrative record that describes an underground evacuation of 90,000 people and the liturgical poem that describes what happened to a city that did not evacuate exist in separate catalogs. Separate institutions, separate scholarly traditions, and no one has placed them side by side in print. The question is not whether the details match. They match. Luminous dust, copper water, altered light, intact bodies without breath, simultaneous animal death. A surface that remained lethal for months. A reoccupation gap of 3 generations. The administrative tablet documents the logistics of survival. The lament documents the aesthetics of death. One is a supply manifest for an underground population. The other is a funeral song for the city left above. They describe the same event from opposite sides of a sealed stone door. The question is, what produced these conditions 4,000 years before any human technology could replicate them? If the texts are accurate, then something descended on southern Mesopotamia that killed with the signature of ionizing radiation, contaminated the environment with radioactive fallout, and drove populations underground for decades. If the texts are convention, then the question is where the convention originated. Literary traditions do not invent clinical details that serve no poetic function. A poet mourning a destroyed city does not need luminous dust. A poet mourning the dead does not need copper-colored water. These details add nothing to the emotional register of the lament. They are not beautiful. They are not symbolic in any known Sumerian theological framework. They are specific, technical, and consistent across texts separated by geography and genre. Conventions come from somewhere. They encode what a culture has seen or what a culture has been told by those who saw. The motifs in the Sumerian city laments the wrong light, the shining dust, the silence that falls on a city like a hand closing over a mouth may be poetry. They may be the most ancient form of poetry, the kind written not to create beauty, but to ensure that what happened is never fully forgotten, even when no one alive remembers what it was. Al-Rashid changed her dissertation topic. Al-Hashimi's transliteration remains in private files. The 4 scholars who have seen the Lagash tablet have not spoken on record. The Lament tablet in Philadelphia has not been retranslated since 2019. The city it mourns went silent 4,000 years ago. And the poem that records its silence has been classified as literature and shelved alongside hymns and prayers in a museum where no one has asked why the silence it describes sounds nothing like war, nothing like famine, nothing like flood, and exactly like something that would not have a name for another 4 millennia. The tablet is in Philadelphia. The lament is still singing. The city is still silent.